Well, it is that time of the week, one of my very favourite times, our chance to catch up with rural weather commentator Phil Duncan, because there is a huge high parked west of New Zealand for over a week now, which is encouraging a light but cool southerly flow into the country. We're seeing those devastating floods in New South Wales. Is that rain heading our way? And how long is that high going to stick around for? There is a flow that's encouraging gloomy weather in some southern and eastern areas, coupled with autumn equinox as well, which is going to mean that our nights are getting longer. Winter's on its way, of course. Surprisingly, these mornings are, of course, a little cooler. We are all feeling the autumnalness of the seasons. Our Rural Weather's Phil Duncan is with us. Phil, this is huge high. What's going to eventuate, and will we get a bit of that moisture?
Yeah, hi Sarah. The high, it's weird. A week ago we were talking about this huge high rolling in, and a whole week has gone by and it hasn't moved barely a centimetre. It's still parked exactly between Hobart and Fiordland. So this is the high. Now, it's a bit smaller though. A week ago it went all the way off the screen, sort of both ways. It's consolidating a lot more into one area, but it's wet there. And as you mentioned in the intro, it's bringing in this sort of cooler southerly. If you licked your finger and held it up to the sky, many parts of New Zealand, you wouldn't even feel that breeze. But there's a slight southerly breeze going around the high. So the mornings are much cooler. And as you say, the equinox has passed. I love that word, autumnal. It's a great word. And so we're in that time of the year now where you really feel it. But over in Aussie, the flip side is they've got these rainmakers, and a big one, a really big one, for them anyway. 200 millimetres of rain coming in the next 3 days alone. In fact, we have a map here for the Australian forecast. So this shows you where the bulk of that rain's coming for Australia anyway. And these areas here, this is sort of on the border of Queensland, New South Wales area, pushing into a huge, huge agricultural area that just over a year ago were just finishing those massive bushfires that turned our skies orange in New Zealand. So this is good news for them. You've got to feel good for our neighbours that they're getting the rain. And on the scale here, that's 120, 150, maybe 200 millimetres of rain. So everyone's asking, as you just said then, is this coming to New Zealand? And the answer is it's a typical weather forecaster's answer. It's like a politician. It's a yes and a no. Yes, the rain's coming, but no, it's going to fall apart at the same time. So we have a little bit of it coming this weekend. This map's actually for a little bit further out, but this weekend we've got a bit of rain coming in on the west coast. So the South Island will get it, but really every other region is just going to get a few showers, a bit of drizzle. It won't accumulate more than 10 or 15 millimetres. So we have to look towards April, which is what we're doing here now. And as we're looking towards April, we're still seeing big highs coming in south of Australia around Tasmania and Melbourne. That's the area they're sort of tracking through and heading towards us. This map I've got in front of you, I might have skipped ahead a wee bit here, but this is for April, the start of April. And I chose Easter Sunday because that's a day where no matter whether you're a farmer or a grower or you're working in an office, that's usually a day that we're often at home and we have the big lunch. And there's a big southerly coming on in then, followed by a high. So what I'm seeing is as we head in towards April, really classic autumn weather going on, where it's just gradually getting colder and maybe gradually getting a little bit wetter. But for now, there's no big rainmaker on the way, I should say, for New Zealand and not coming out of Aussie. Although there's a wee bit of rain this weekend, like I say, the west coast may well have rain mornings, but elsewhere probably not.
So not some great news, because there is parts in New Zealand that are still relatively dry. Are you keeping a close eye on that, Phil?
Yeah, and so that's why this map's quite an important one, because what this is showing is where are we going to be in the first sort of week of April? How does that month start off? And so if you look at Easter Sunday, and you can see, okay, yeah, there's a cold southerly coming through. There's some rain for Southland, Otago, Canterbury, and a bit later on, probably going into Easter Monday, we'll probably see a bit of rain or showers moving into the North Island. But the problem with this map is there's no low pressure in this area that's going to really drive in rain. And for eastern areas and northern areas, we all know that these systems sort of run out of steam. And on top of that, you've got this big powerful high, 1030 hectopascals. Coming in behind it all, the next one out here in the Indian Ocean, 1024. These are big highs, and the gap between them, that's where we see the rainmakers in these areas here. Nothing huge.
Now, Phil, this week we've had Central District's field days in Fielding last week. I went up, great time. But this week is the South Island Agricultural Field Days in Kuwi, just outside of Christchurch. What is in store for the weather ahead this week for those walking some long distances around what is one of the most iconic agricultural field days on the calendar? And he's fine.
Well, it's looking pretty good, to be honest with you. The forecast is pretty excellent. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, pretty much dry. There is a risk on Wednesday of a couple of showers, but look, when you look at the scale here at rural weather, that's not much. That's just a couple of spits coming over from the western side. I can't imagine it's too much. Warms up though as we go through. Look at Friday, 26 degrees, so that's not to be complained about. Wind-wise, not looking too bad. It's a little bit breezier on Thursday. That's the only day of the week that we've got a bit of a gusty breeze coming through. It's nothing too much. And as we go through by Friday, it's calm again. Temperature-wise, we just touched on that. But interesting to see that temperature up and down this week in Canterbury. So we start on today where it's 20, 24, down on Wednesday. That's where that southerly comes through. That's really actually as that big high finally starts to roll on in. And then we're back to 26. And by the way, if you go to rural weather, you've got down here the humidex, which is also in the red line, which is usually just a little bit above the air temperature. That's because it feels just a little bit warmer. Now, the last thing I want to focus on, our fog forecaster, which is unique to ruralweather.co.nz. There is no fog forecaster on planet Earth that I've found. And what this shows is on Wednesday morning, there's actually quite a high chance of possible fog. So it might be, that's a sign that it's calm and settled, a little bit of moisture in the air. Not a wet day, but it might be a little bit foggy. And same thing on Thursday morning. And if you don't get fog, because we say possible fog, and we say that because sometimes you can get really low cloud that's sort of almost fog, but just not quite there. But either way, it looks really good. It couldn't have been a better forecast, really.
Oh, the organisers will certainly be pleased to hear that. And actually leading into our next topic, Phil, we're going to be talking around the extension to winter grazing rules. How far out can you actually forecast in terms of what potential winter we may be in store for? Because it would be quite advantageous if it was a bit dry.
Yeah, it's a good question because as weather forecasters, we try and look at the weather maps and the ones that we show the highs and the lows in, and they're really good for about 2 weeks out. Once you get after that, you're trusting the computers to really crunch where they sort of see the peaks of the high pressure and the peaks of the low pressure, and that sort of works out 6 months from now where they sort of think it might be warmer or colder or wetter or drier. It's a really hard science, and in New Zealand, it's made especially hard because we're in the roaring 40s. There's basically no other countries on Earth other than the tip of Argentina and Tasmania that are enduring this crazy weather that we're in this part of the world. So you can look at things like, we work with IBM, and they can do forecasts out for 9 months. We have a lot of back and forths with them about how much accurate that is, how useful that actually is for farmers and growers. But, it's an analogy someone gave me was, we got to the moon in the 1960s on a spacecraft that had less technology than cell phones did 20 years ago. And if you dropped a tool on the floor, it would drop through it. That was the spacecraft that landed on the moon. So we're at that stage now where we're looking at long-range forecasts where it's not perfect, and yes, you can drop something through it and it breaks, but for the most part, it's the best thing that we've got. And the reason why that analogy I find so cool is because that aircraft landed on the moon and did this incredible thing 50 years ago. This technology that we've got with IBM is in that kind of category. It's a bit confusing. It's not necessarily perfect, but it's definitely getting into that realm. So to answer your question really quickly, I would say in a short way, you can get out to about a month. I think once you get beyond a month, it is hard to get very accurate. But what you can look for are the general trends in the entire New Zealand area. I'd be far more interested in that as a farmer and grower about what April and May might bring me in the whole Australasia region than I would about my specific farm, because that forecast in my farm is likely to be wrong. But the big picture one, there's a better chance that's more accurate. And from that, you'll be able to work out what that means actually for your farm, if that makes sense. I hope it does. I'm just trying to be an honest answer and just say, yes, trust us, we're all accurate.
Oh, well, yeah, no, you've just probably highlighted how difficult your job really is. And we thank you so much for bringing us the simplified version so that we can make more informed decisions. Thank you so much. Go to ruralweather.co.nz for your specific personalised weather forecast over the next 10 days. It's absolutely fantastic. Brought to you by Phil Duncan and the team behind Weather Watch.